Well, it started in 2010. We had, I was associated with some others, and we were involved in attempting, with a great deal of difficulty, I might add, to fund humanitarian projects. In particular, the area of that I wanted to work in was funding of projects among the native people in the Southwest. And so that's where I was living at the time. So my interest was there, had quite a few contacts. And so anyway, one of our group said, listen, I think we can raise some of these funds. And so he went to Cambodia to speak with Dr. Ray C. Dam, who was the director, if you want to call it that, of the Office of International Treasury Control. Now, the Office of International Treasury Control is that organization which was set up to basically govern the what we call the collateral accounts, the gold that underwrites all the world's currencies. And so my friend went to that organization, and Dr. Dam agreed in principle to set us up a trading program to fund our projects. But he says, it's important for me to have a chance to see who else you're working with, so he would be satisfied that he was working with the right kind of people. As a consequence of that, myself and another gentleman, we went later on to Phnom Penh, Cambodia, to meet with the Office of International Treasury Control and Dr. Dam. And so when we got there, Dr. Dam was out of country. And so we met with the cabinet and the chief of the cabinet. And the chief of the cabinet was an Australian. Well, Dr. Dam himself is Cambodian, but the chief of the cabinet is Australian, and he's a man known as Keith Scott. And Keith Scott is if there's anybody that knows what goes on the planet in regards to financing and so forth, Keith Scott is the person to ask, because he goes deep, and he is very well trusted, as I'll explain in a moment, by the Asian community, the ones that have the gold. So, the various people there were passing out business cards, for information and so forth. And I didn't have a business card. I don't do business. And so Keith asked me, he says, well, why don't you have a business card? And I said, I don't do business. He said, what do you do? And so I told him, I do commerce. Now, that kind of threw him back a little bit. He was trying to figure that comment out. And so in between that meeting and our next meeting, he had a chance to contact some of his friends across the planet. And when we got back to the next meeting, Keith told me, he says, when you came in here the other day, he said, I had no idea who you were. He said, but I contacted all my friends across the planet. He said, everybody knows you. I said, well, now you know me, don't you? So anyway, Keith and I became close friends from that time. And then in respect to some operations that were wanted to be addressed by the OITC, I was given an official appointment to operate as a representative of OITC in the United States. So I asked them basically, what is it you want me to do? They said, main thing is we want you to go over there and fix that foreclosure problem. I said, gracious, that's a pretty big job. And they said, well, you're the man for it. Get over there and get busy. And I said, okay. And so anyway, I came back after that, and we went to work on that. As you know, here in the United States in 2008, the mortgage bubble popped, and we had all those problems with foreclosures and so forth. And that was very embarrassing. That was very embarrassing to Dr. Dam and the OITC, because they're the organization that underwrite all the mortgages that the banks are putting out. And their first comment to me was, the American people are not paying their bills. I said, oh, no, you got the wrong idea on that. Let me explain to you what's going on. So So then I explained the criminal activities of the banks, how they were handling things, and so forth. And so they had one of those aha moments. They said, aha. So, Winston, get over there and get that fixed. And so when I came back, certainly we continued working on those things. And there was some ups and downs. At one point, we had arranged a major bank trade to produce the funds because we had enough connections that we were prepared to go and purchase all of the secondary mortgage paper. Now, if we could have taken all that away from the banks and went back to the homeowners with a new deal, a more favorable deal, then we would have accomplished what Dr. Dam had given to me to do. But as it turned out, our trade that we did with HSBC Hong Kong got stolen from us, as is natural with HSBC Hong Kong. Boy, what a bunch of crooks they are. But in any event, we weren't able to accomplish that particular thing, so I had to continue with my education program. And at this point here, I do believe that I do have the solution to the mortgage problems, and so I'm starting to educate, from that point of view. And the upcoming seminar that we're going to do is going to be a continuation, and I will explain some of those principles at that time because I believe that properly utilized, that technology will in fact resolve these problems with the banks and the foreclosures. But consequences arose. An attempt on the life of Dr. Dam was made. They tried to poison him. He recovered from that. He's still alive. I won't say where he's at, but he's still alive, still kicking, because he is, in fact, a key figure on world financing. And I won't go into all that. But in any event, in consequence of some of those things, Keith Scott continued on, and he was asked, and he was given the appointment with the Sukarno Trust as the settler for the Sukarno Trust with full power of attorney from the Amana, the people that own the gold. So in consequence of that, in 2012, in the spring of 2012, Keith wanted to address some problems. And so I went to Jakarta to meet with him to see, what could be done about the problem he was trying to address. Now, here's the problem. Way back in 1933, 35 period of time, the Federal Reserve banks leased 2.4 million metric tons of gold to underwrite the Federal Reserve notes in the Federal Reserve system. And with that lease, there was a 4% fee. Now, this is not interest, a 4% fee annually to be paid for the use of that gold. The problem was they had never paid the 4%. So at that point, Keith, as the settler for the Sukarno Trust, wanted to do something about that. And so when I got there and he explained the situation to me, I said, well, this sounds like a real good place to institute a commercial lien against the Federal Reserve banks. And so he said, that's a good idea. Can you put that together? I said, yes, I can. As it turns out, I'm an expert in commercial liens. So anyway, I worked on that about 2 days, putting that all together, wherein we went against each separate of the 12 Federal Reserve banks as lien debtors. Now, what I asked him in that respect, I said, on the contract for the lease, how is that 4% to be paid? So he had a copy of the contract right there on his computer. So he looked and he said, it doesn't specify. I said, good. I said, gold was given, gold will be required. And so when we wrote the lien up, the true bill uh, was written in gold. Now, for some reason, he wanted to start calculating from 1961. And I think it had to do had something to do with some of the operations of John F. Kennedy and President Sukarno, perhaps with some of those Green-Hilton agreements and so forth. But anyway, he wanted to start calculating from 1961, which was 51 years total. So anyway, when I calculated it all up, the 4% annual fee added up to twice the amount of the original gold that was leased. Now, we knew the Federal Reserve banks didn't have any gold at all anyway. I mean, if people think there's any gold in Fort Knox, you know, you got a pipe dream going on, because there's no gold there. All the bars that they see and so forth, they're simply tungsten bars that are gold plated. There's no gold in the Fort Knox. But anyway, the key to it was this, and the real value of what we were doing was that the Federal Reserve banks, as privately owned central banks, were due to recharter 1 January 2013. But with that lien in place, they could not recharter. And in consequence of that, the privately owned Federal Reserve banks came under the control of the United States Treasury, which was exactly where we wanted them. So in any event, you know, aside from, you know, traffic tickets and IRS liens and all those kinds of things, I have been able to impact the international, because those liens that we did started a domino effect. And Keith further went on and did some other commercial liens against some of the other European and Asian central banks, which had in fact illegally been trading on the collateral accounts. So we started kind of a domino effect. It was kind of funny as we were working on that. Keith was in communication with some of his friends. One of them was a pretty high fella in the FBI, another friend who was pretty high up in the Pentagon. So he told them what we were doing. And their comment was, how soon can you get that done? Because they saw the value of what was happening, and perhaps that would have assisted them in some of the things that they were working on. So again, the same principles, the same technology that we use on what we would call our day-to-day efforts and so forth, was the same technology that was put in place in that international venue. So it's been a fun ride. And there's been other things also, which I don't need to go into, that we have done with the international, where I have been able to use the technology to assist the effort that's being made at present to correct the international financial matrix.
So it sounds like the current phase and the phase that you've been in for a little while is really, correct me if I'm wrong, focused on working with international governments and solving some of these problems. Is that
no, the present phase that I'm working in now is simply commercial redemption, whether on a local basis, on a national basis, international, or whatever. The next phase I think that I'm going into, although I don't have a